Deep within the dense jungles of ancient Mexico, a powerful city slowly rose into history, surrounded by shimmering waters, sacred temples, and an empire guided by gods. Built across a vast network of lakes, Tenochtitlan became the beating heart of the Aztec Empire, a city of millions where culture, war, and religion intertwined. The streets were filled with citizens, markets overflowed with goods, and warriors trained tirelessly, while priests prepared for ceremonies that maintained the gods' favor. The Aztecs believed their empire was chosen by divine will, that every action, every war, and every sacrifice shaped the fate of the sun and the world itself. Central to their beliefs was the idea that the sun could not survive without the offering of human life, a ritual that demanded constant devotion and obedience. These sacrifices struck fear into conquered peoples and ensured loyalty, but also reinforced the idea that Tenochtitlan's power was absolute and unstoppable. Yet despite its strength, the greatest threat to this mighty empire was not rebellion or rival cities, but a force arriving silently from across the vast ocean. In Iwuijo, Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conquistador driven by ambition, greed, and the thirst for glory, arrived on the shores of Mexico, bringing with him a handful of soldiers and unknown consequences. With only 600 men, Cortés faced an empire of millions, relying on strategy, alliances, and the shock of foreign weapons to challenge an entire civilization. Steel swords, armor, firearms, and horses stunned the Aztecs, creatures, and tools unlike anything their people had ever seen, changing the battlefield in an instant. Some Aztecs whispered that these men were gods returning from prophecy, sent to claim what was theirs, and fear began to spread through the city's streets. Emperor Montezuma hesitated, torn between fear, faith, and indecision, unsure whether to strike immediately or risk welcoming these strangers into his palace. Against the advice of his warriors, he allowed the invaders to enter Tenochtitlan, a choice that would echo through history and seal the empire's fate. This single decision marked the beginning of the end, as the city's gates opened to a small army that carried weapons, disease, and ambition unlike any before. Cortés seized Montezuma, imprisoning the emperor within his own palace, demonstrating that no ruler, no matter how mighty, could resist this sudden and cunning threat. Anger and confusion swept through Tenochtitlan as citizens realized their leader was captive, and unrest spread like wildfire through every district of the city. The streets erupted in chaos, with fires burning, warriors clashing, and the once orderly city transformed into a battlefield where survival became uncertain. During this uprising, Montezuma died, a mysterious and tragic figure whose death left the city without guidance at a moment of extreme peril. Under the cover of night, the Spanish fled the city with great loss, carrying stolen treasures, yet leaving behind a population that was furious and vengeful. This retreat became known in history as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows, when the conquerors faced the wrath of the city and the cunning of its people. But even as the city mourned, a far deadlier and invisible enemy had already arrived, one that would devastate the population far more than swords or fire. Smallpox, carried unknowingly by the Europeans, swept through the city, killing thousands each day in a silent and unstoppable wave of disease. Entire families, warriors, and priests fell victim, as fear and despair gripped Tenochtitlan, while the empire's foundation slowly crumbled from within. Leadership weakened, soldiers perished, and the once mighty military force became fragmented, unable to defend against the combined weight of disease, hunger, and invaders. Months later, Cortés returned, better prepared, stronger, and joined by native allies who despised Aztec rule, ready to finish the conquest that had begun months before. These former enemies of the Aztecs brought knowledge, manpower, and determination, tipping the balance against a city already weakened by internal collapse. Together, they laid siege to Tenochtitlan, cutting off supplies, blocking canals, and using every tactic to break the spirit of the inhabitants. Hunger, disease, and relentless attacks gradually destroyed the infrastructure and morale, leaving the city unable to sustain its population or defend its streets. Street by street, district by district, The Aztecs fought with courage, but the outcome had already begun to favor the invaders. Great temples burned, markets were emptied, and the canals became clogged with debris, marking the